Welcome to another episode of Witty CFB. Your host, Rob Sheply here. And on today's episode, we are going to be breaking down a Big Ten matchup, one of the matchups that I've been looking forward to all year, which is Penn State versus USC. Penn State ranked number 4 right now, off to a incredible start thus far. And when you look at this Penn State team, I mean they've definitely exceeded expectations. I mean you have Drew Allar, who's so far thrown for 1,100 yards, nine touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns. Who's been pretty consistent. He's definitely done enough to get Penn State to where they are. You have a very strong rushing attack and Nick Singleton, who has 5 combined touchdowns, 408 yards. He definitely hasn't been, he's definitely had some injury issues here and there, but for the most part too, this should be a a game where if Penn State can get through this, I mean, you definitely have to imagine too that they can make some noise and possibly be the ones to face Ohio State to face the winner of Ohio State and Oregon in the Big Ten championship, because for the rest of the way, I mean their schedule is relatively manageable too, because when I look at this game, you know Singleton, is expected to play, which is going to be a huge get for this team. Penn State is coming off a strong win versus UCLA, which they look strong in. The defense looks formidable. Drew Allar had some good throws, and the rushing attack was there, and they controlled the pace of the game. And then when I look at this Penn State game, and even when I previewed them earlier this year, there were a couple of things that really stood out to me. I think first and foremost, Penn State has this issue where they have these big expectations, and then they just have one really disappointing game where they lose one, and then they end up not being in the Big Ten championship game, and then they play a strong bowl game like a Rose Bowl or something like that. And it is one of those examples where where the expansion from 4 to 12 teams benefits a team like Penn State, where more often than not they've been overshadowed by the Michigans and the Ohio States, and going into the season perhaps even USC. But USC for the most part has been way too inconsistent offensively and defensively. But Miller Moss is also a very capable quarterback too. I mean, if you watched any of the first week versus LSU, I mean, he looked strong. There were a lot of times where he was getting through his progressions, and he was making throws that only his receivers, Zakiah Branch and Lane, were able to get to. And looking forward to this too. I mean, what USC does have, I'll start off with USC first. What USC has going for them is, I think, one, they're at home, and their USC is definitely the Coliseum, one of those places where it really is a difficult place to play. I mean, I'm not saying it's quite like the 2004s of Matt Leinart or Reggie Bush and all that, but at the same time, USC is one of those programs that you see on your schedule, and nobody ever really wants to play them. But they're coming off a really, I'd willing to say, an embarrassing loss versus Minnesota, where they just played sloppy, undisciplined, and for the most part too, Minnesota deserved that win. And when USC right now, they're 3-2, I expect them to come out aggressive. I expect them to come out and want to play spoiler, and I also anticipate them for a lot, just a lot more passing, just like we've seen them do all year. Right now, they lead the Big Ten in most passing attempts. Right now, I think for the most part, we're going to see more of the same from USC in terms of their offensive program here, and how they match up offensively versus Penn State's defense. I mean, Penn State, everybody knows James Franklin's a phenomenal head coach, been there 10 plus years, trying to get over the hump of winning a Big Ten title and possibly making a run into the playoff too. But for the most part too, the defense has always been kind of the backbone of the Penn State program. And when you look at this on paper, there are many reasons why this game could and does benefit Penn State, in the sense of, if Penn State can control the tempo of the ball, they're gonna rush it a bunch, and I also anticipate them bringing a lot of extra pressure, particularly on the edge. I think that's the one strength that Penn State really has that I'm not entirely sure USC can respond to. Because out of all the inconsistencies that we've seen from USC thus far this season, is that the pass protection has simply not been there for USC. I anticipate that front seven to really get to Miller Moss. I think he's definitely gonna be under some distress, and he's going to have to hope that these wide receivers can get open and bail him out a couple of times, because if that edge tandem can wreak havoc just like they have throughout the rest of the season, and like we saw versus when they played Illinois, for example, or when they played West Virginia, it's definitely going to be one of those games where it could be a legitimate statement victory for Penn State. Because at the same time too, when I look at Penn State right now, there are a couple things that I'm seeing. For the most part, too, if I were Penn State and James Franklin, I think you would mimic exactly what you saw, exactly how they came into Illinois. That Illinois, they've had a really strong season thus far. I talked about them on the program a couple weeks ago when they played Nebraska. Brett Belima deserves a hell of a lot of credit for what he's done over there, and they're kind of built in almost in the same way that Penn State is, in the sense of they have a very strong front seven. The secondary is formidable, not excellent, but it's formidable enough to the point where you're not anticipating them to get too many, to get beat too much. But at the same time, the biggest worry if you're Penn State is there's a big difference between playing Miller Moss versus playing Achmeyer over at Illinois, for example, or playing Garrett Green. There's nothing against those guys. It's just that Miller Moss is a lot more of a capable quarterback and somebody who is, I think, a lot more respected and can possibly pose a threat to them compared to some of the quarterbacks that I've rattled off, and compared to some of the offenses that they've seen this year. So for Penn State, it is definitely a legitimate test, and USC, more props to them. They've definitely made a difficult schedule for themselves. I mean, when they played LSU, that was a really strong win for them, and it was a testament for definitely putting that all together too, because the consistent criticism of Lincoln Riley thus far has been, oh, that they don't play defense, and now it kind of feels like almost the exact exact flip that I was talking about with Pittsburgh earlier, in the sense of now it's okay. USC is kind of is starting to get their defense as semi respectable, and meanwhile the offensive side of the ball has been so inconsistent to the point where you definitely have a legitimate concern. But at the same time, when you think about all of the outside variables, and you think to themselves of the past history that Penn State has in general of some of these big moment games, I don't think it's necessary to completely dismiss USC. Do I think Penn State should be favored and probably should win this game? Absolutely. But there comes a point in time where you have to ask yourself, as a Penn State fan, is James Franklin the guy that's going to get you a national championship? Because he before he was at Vanderbilt, worked his way up. Now he's at Penn State. Because if you're if Penn State does have does lose this game, I mean, they're going to be on a bye next week, so I think it's going to add sort of the fuel to the fire, in terms of, let's say Penn State just throws a complete dud versus USC this weekend. I mean, I think you're going to hear more rumblings in terms of, is James Franklin really the guy that can lead him to a national championship, and probably most importantly, just a Big Ten title. I mean, even if we can just start off with there and then get a legitimate run, I think those are the conversations that we're really going to be seeing too, because I think Drew Allar is finally at the point now where he's really putting it together. I mean, even if you've watched him back, when he was a freshman and a sophomore, I mean, it goes to show, he's definitely transformed a lot. You can tell that the offensive staff at Penn State has done a ton to really help him with his progressions, really kind of clean up some of those the sloppy mechanics that he has before. And quite frankly, I think he just looks like he's having fun out there. He looks a lot more comfortable. He's really taking in all the moments, and most importantly, he's the guy that has been the leader of this program, the face of the program at the moment. And I think when you have that compliment to Singleton, who should be playing this week, I think Penn State's going to be coming out hungry. They're going to be coming out determined, and it could be the week where we say to ourselves, you know, uh, maybe we just need to start respecting Penn State more because yes, they're ranked number 4 right now, and yes, they're off to a great start. But in order for them to really rectify themselves as that number 4 team, you really have to see a strong performance against USC this week. Because yes, I think USC does have some dynamic weapons on offense, particularly in the wide receiving core. I think Penn State's secondary is really going to have to hone down and not give up too many explosive plays. I think at the same time, it's going to be a really fun matchup to watch in terms of the tempo of the game and most importantly, the trenches too, because you have USC who's going to be trying to get off plays really quick and probably passing the ball really often. I anticipate at least somewhere in the motion of 35 to 45 attempts, if not more, depending on what the outcome of the game is. And at the same time, too, you have to ask yourself. I brought this up again. The edge rushers, and particularly the defensive line. Can USC's offensive line, you know, really put it together and give Miller Moss enough time to not for him not to have to scramble out of the pocket right away? And can he find those dynamic playmakers in Lane and Zakari Branch and all those guys there too? So overall, when you look at this game, you have to ask yourself, if I'm Penn State, I'm really just going to do the exact same game plan that I had at Illinois, which is run the ball, control the tempo of the game, and play really strong defense and make their quarterback look uncomfortable. And if you're USC, I think you have to double down on passing the ball because I think they're going to have a lot of trouble rushing the ball against USC. Even though I do think Miller Moss is a lot more athletic than people give him credit for, I think you expect more of the same there. Look for USC to try to get Allar out of the pocket a little bit, and for him to most importantly kind of lose that rhythm that he's had the past couple weeks. And then most importantly, if you're USC, try to find as many ways as possible to limit those long drives that Penn State has done a great job at, and to get the ball in Miller Moss's hands, and hopefully for him to take over the game and pull off the upset at at home in Los Angeles.